Money. Even if you don't play by its rules, you live in a world that does. On one hand, it can show us the best of human nature: innovation, generosity, and charity. It has the power to fund dreams, fuel ambitions, and uplift communities. On the other hand, it also shows us the worst humans have to offer: greed, corruption, and inequality. All too often, money becomes a tool for oppression. And still, some of us want more and more of it, even though they don't always need it. While more and more people struggle to make ends meet, others amass fortunes beyond our comprehension. In the game of money, the stakes are high, and the rules are often rigged. But it wasn't always like that. Money as we know it was invented to make our lives easier. In ancient times, people relied on a barter system to obtain the goods they needed. This wasn't always easy. Supply and demand played a big role in it. In a barter system, both parties involved must have goods or services that the other party wants or needs. For example, imagine a farmer who wants to exchange his wheat for shoes. However, the cobbler who makes the shoes might not need a wheat at the moment. Instead, he might need lumber to repair his workshop. These two parties wouldn't be able to strike a deal, leaving them both at a loss. Another example could be two people having different opinions about something's worth. If you were a hungry carpenter that needs bread, you'd be willing to pay a higher price for it. But if the baker doesn't need any woodwork done, you could simply reject your offers or make his price unfairly high. That's where money came in. Instead of trading goods, societies started to use coins, with a set value for buying and selling. The oldest known coins are called the Lydian lions, dating back to around the 7th century before the Common Era. These coins were made of electrum, a naturally occurring mixture of gold and silver, and their worth was likely determined by the weight and the metal content of the coins themselves. Over the centuries, different societies used different kinds of rare metals for their coins. Gold, bronze, silver, and even iron were used in different shapes and sizes. As societies became more organized, governments began to play a greater role in regulating the value of coins. Over time, the link between the value of the coin and their metal content weakened, especially with the adoption of fiat currency. Simply put, fiat currency is money that has value because the government says it does. The value comes from people's trust in the government and in the economy. Without trust, it shatters. In time, coins were made from cheaper mixtures of metals and were minted with a kind of stamp to determine the value. People soon began to realize that dragging around a heavy pouch full of coins was not the most convenient way to travel, and that's how printed money came to be. The earliest known paper money originated from China. Paper money also spread to Europe and the rest of the world through trade, and around the 17th and 18th century the first central banks were established in Europe, which were granted the authority to issue paper currency. Slowly but surely, many countries moved away from the weight-based monetary system and fully transitioned to the fiat currency system. And maybe that's where the trouble began. With governments now being able to regulate money by printing more of it, a repeating problem occurred: inflation. Inflation occurs when demand for goods and services exceed their supply. When a government prints too much money, it increases the overall money supply in the economy. This means there is more money available for people to spend. And with more money in circulation, people have more purchasing power. If the supply of goods and services in the economy doesn't increase at the same rate as the money supply, demand for those goods and services can outpace the supply. This increased demand compared to supply can lead to higher prices, causing inflation. In the last few years, we've all felt the effects of inflation. It might have been while grocery shopping in your local supermarket, buying a new video game, or maybe even looking for a house. In the year 2023, global prices rose by 7.4% on average. That wouldn't be a problem if our wages would increase with it. But for most of us, that isn't the case. So, how can it be that some of us are amassing billions of dollars while others are fighting for scraps? If the government regulates the monetary market, shouldn't they intervene? There has always been a gap between the rich and the poor. And spoiler alert, communism doesn't work. But never has that gap been so big. So why does it feel like the game is rigged? Because in a way, it is. At first, our monetary system was based on rare metals. And because the value of precious metals tends to be relatively stable over time, coins made from these metals provided a hedge against inflation, unlike fiat currency. Fiat currency can be devalued through excessive printing and government manipulation. Metal coins maintain their value more reliably. Having a monetary system based on rare metals also meant it was harder to control, which is a good thing, because whoever controls the money has the power. And right now, the government owns the money. All of it. In a perfect world, a government controlled monetary system would work. But we don't live in a perfect world. We'd like to think that governments exist out of only professionals and scientists, that each of them knows exactly what they're doing. But in reality, that's hardly the case. Let's take the country of Venezuela for example. During almost the entire 20th century, the country had an exchange rate stability that lasted several decades, and until 1980, some of the lowest inflation rates in the world. It was one of the richest countries in Latin America. This was due to the high demand of oil on the international market, and Venezuela being the country with the biggest oil reserves in the world. So how could this country fall so deeply? Well, it's all because of a man called Hugo Chavez, a military officer that obtained presidential power by promising the world to the working class of Venezuela. Under Chavez's rule, the government seized many private companies to nationalize them and then do nothing with them. This, together with the dropping oil prices, tanked the Venezuelan economy. Now, Venezuela is ruled by Nicolas Maduro, an even less competent leader that still follows Chavez's ideals. Consumer price inflation in Venezuela averaged 9,000% in the last 10 years. That's well above the Latin American average of 8.4%. So if an incompetent government can bang the entire monetary system, why don't we go back to a system that regulates itself? Well, people tried, and they're still trying. The most recent example is Bitcoin. Bitcoin operates on a decentralized network, meaning it's not controlled by any single entity or government. It is a limited supply, capping the limit at 21 million coins, which creates a scarcity similar to the rare metals in old coins. It was greeted with a lot of resistance from governments, and some of the most iconic people in the financial world were hostile to it.
All of the Bitcoin in the world, and you offered it to me for $25. I wouldn't take it because what would I do with it?
If you think about it, it isn't that strange. Governments and banks rely on tools such as interest rate adjustments and control of the money supply to manage economics. Bitcoin exists outside of these tools and can be seen as a direct challenge to their authority and ability to control the economic market. In history, kings and queens never gave away their power away freely, and governments are no different. Maybe the last few years can be seen as a wake-up call, and it's time for a change. We're all playing a game, but only one entity controls it. The game could work if governments would be ran by the best of the best. Sadly, they are not. Maybe a different system is the future. But right now, the world isn't ready. What do you think we should change?